Okay, I'm going to start by saying, Xin chào, quý vị. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for coming on a Saturday morning. I want to say, acknowledge, why are we here? This is the month of May, and May is Mental Health Awareness Month. You must have noticed some of us are wearing lime green. Dr. Chow is wearing lime green. Dr. Fung is wearing something green. And we have to fix with Atsuda and get her a green ribbon soon. And I am wearing lime green here. Many of our staff in the back are also wearing lime green. I would encourage you to ask why. We are wearing lime green because lime green is the symbol of mental health, and we are all gathered here today to celebrate mental wellness and mental health. And I want to welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Mai Fung.
Good morning.
Dr. Susie Matsuda. And our very own Dr. Clayton Chow from Healthcare Agency. I am Bhuvana Rao. I am the director over the Office of Suicide Prevention. And at my office, we mental health awareness activity. This is not working, huh? No worries. Thank you so much. Hello, can you hear me? Perfect, thank you. So we focus our office with activities related to raising awareness on mental health, and we do this by many different kinds of activities, today being one of them. We are all going to be hearing more about what are different ways we can raise awareness, but also how can we educate ourselves by our own experiences. Our three guest speakers will be talking about their own experiences, having a dialogue about how when you are experiencing some kind of mental health conditions, what is one supposed to do? How is one supposed to address it? And finally, how is one supposed to seek help? Now, it's easy for us to say seek help because there are so many barriers to seeking help, and stigma is one big one. So I can talk about this for a long time, but I want to turn our focus, Hello? Okay, there we go. So again, with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Clayton Chow.
Thank you, Bhuvana. Before we get started, I want to thank again the Vietnamese-American Cancer Foundations and Okapika. These two agencies was really helping us setting this up at very last minute. We wanted to have this event in May because there are so many meanings for the month of May. I'll get into that in a second, but I also would like to thank Southland Integrated Services, Korean Community Services, the Cambodian Family, Asian Pacific AIDS Intervention Team, Rainbow of Orange County, California Healthy Nail Salon Collaborative, Hope Community Services, Asian American Seniors Citizen Service Center, South Asian Network, and the Pacific Islander Health Partnership. All of these entities form the API Task Force partners that really have been providing a lot of human and health services for our community throughout this last almost 2.5 years of the pandemic. So please give them a round of applause.
Woo!
Okay, with that, let's get started. I'm going to start recording this event, this conversation, I will call it, and then you'll be able to view it on YouTube. We will share with you the link right after this. Actually, it's quite easy if you go onto the YouTube channel and type in Orange County Healthcare Agency, or specifically your Health Matters OC, you will be able to view this. We have done a talk show that air live every other Tuesday night at 6 p.m. on various topics related to health in the community. And so the next show will be next Tuesday evening at 6 p.m. on YouTube or Facebook. It is live. You can always ask questions while we are doing it live. And I believe the next Tuesday, the conversation is going to be on women's mental health. Specifically, we will walk you through the mental health conditions that women in America faces throughout the life cycle. So we're going to start from infant, young toddlers, all the way up to senior. And I hope you will air in. Today, the conversation is probably will be a bit more specific, related to the struggle that Asian Americans, specifically the Asian American immigrant who have experienced. Dr. Mai Phương Nguyen is featured in this book right here. I asked her to bring a few copies to sell, but she didn't.
It's on its way, Ann.
It is on its way.
But not today, on
Okay.
Monday. But
Okay.
you can get it on Barnes & Noble or the enemy of Bezos is Amazon.com. It's called
Yeah.
Brilliance Beyond Borders.
Yeah. So let me ask our panelists to introduce themselves, and then we plunge right in. The person who came late should go first. Dr. Susie Dong Masuda.
Be glad to do so, and thank you. I'm sorry. My name is Susie Dong, Susie Xuyen Dong, and currently I work at the Southland Integrated Services as the Director of Behavioral Health Services, and I used to be with the county for a number of years in the adult outpatient mental health, and some of my time is doing some volunteer work. And I think that's about it. I'm a clinical psychologist.
Dr. Mai
Ngắn
Phương.
gọn và rất là tuyệt vời. Bác Mai Phương tự giới thiệu. It's hard to put it all in 2 sentences. My name is Dr. Mai Phương Nguyen. By day, I am a house call geriatrician. I see elders. 95% of my patients are Vietnamese speaking in their homes. In the age of COVID has been transformative for myself and my patients. I am many other things. I am a daughter of 82-year-old Vietnamese-American refugee immigrants. We are not just immigrants, we are refugees. No, there's a big difference, and I think we need to underscore that this is a community of refugee immigrants. And then for my own healing journey, I also write and produce in-language radio, TV, and film to help perpetuate our stories in America. Because as first-generation immigrants, it has been very hard to root ourselves in this new country. And as the first generation of mental and community health champions, it has been our burden and our privilege to give voice to this community. So I'm here to share some stories and to help those of you who are struggling with mental health find ways to get that help for your children and your parents and everybody in between.
Yeah. Nếu như mà quý vị biết thì đây là lần đầu tiên mà tôi có cái vinh dự nói chuyện chung với cả hai bác sĩ Xuyến và lại bác sĩ Mai Phương. For those of you in the community, actually this is a privilege for me. This is the first time that I have a chance to have a conversation with both of them at the same time. Separately, we have done thing.
That's our first time
Yeah, this is
together
our first
as
time
three.
together. Yeah, thì nếu như mà quý vị biết mà có theo dõi TV với lại radio thì tôi có cơ hội nói chuyện với hai vị này, nhưng mà không có nói chung. Có trên radio show với lại bác sĩ Mai Phương, rồi có chung cái TV show với lại bác sĩ Xuyến. Susie and I Xuyến and I used to run a TV show many years ago, and then I used to talk on the radio with Mai Phương radio show. So this is a treat. We'll see how we're going to navigate this, right? Because they're both powerful and very assertive women, and grateful to have them here. So we want this to be productive. We want to share a story that you can reflect upon, and hopefully you can walk away with a sense of encouragement, or a sense of urgency to really have this type of conversation among yourself, with your families and with your friends. Thì hy vọng là sau cái buổi họp này là quý vị có thể về nhà trong cái môi trường của quý vị, có những cái cơ hội và những cái điều kiện để nói chuyện với lại mấy người trong gia đình của quý vị, hoặc là bạn bè của quý vị. Tại vì cái đề tài hôm nay nó rất là quan trọng. Cái đề tài hôm nay là nói về sức khỏe tâm thần của phụ nữ Á Châu, mà đặc biệt là phụ nữ Á Châu mà đã trải qua, không phải sinh sống ở đây, những người phụ nữ mà tới đây bằng diện người tị nạn nhé. Thì vấn đề nó nhiều khi nó cũng hơi nhạy cảm một chút xíu, nhưng mà hy vọng đây là một cái môi trường bảo mật, quý vị có thể giữ cái bảo mật đó cho chúng tôi. Actually, as soon as I ask, this is a safe environment, and hopefully it will stimulate you to go home and have a conversation with your own family and friends. And then I talk about confidentiality, but we're going to record this. It's confidentiality for you, but the three of us going to be open book. So, you guys ready?
Right. You're ready.
Okay.
Born ready.
Born ready. Very good. Glad to hear that. Let me set the context why this is a very important conversation. And let me preface it by saying, the conversations about women's mental health, Vietnamese women, specifically refugee mental health, but I think as men, we need to participate in this conversation as well, because healing is a community healing. It cannot be the responsibility of the women. Thì hy vọng là quý vị về nhà nói chuyện. Tôi rằng cái đề tài hôm nay là về phụ nữ, nhưng mà đối với bên phía nam mình thì mình cũng có một cái trách nhiệm cho cái quá trình mà nó gọi là healing đó, để giúp chúng ta ai cũng được khỏe mạnh. Thì đây là một cái đề tài mà cần sự tham gia của tất cả mọi người, không chỉ phụ nữ thôi. So, there are two books you see on the table here. One, obviously, Brilliance Beyond Borders, and to me is more of a textbook than an anthologies or stories of women. As you see, the way I do textbook is I write a lot of notes. So you see all this thing, right?
Chết rồi.
I warned you ahead of time.
Chết
Yes, I warned you ahead of time. Dr. Mai Phương, I think I studied this book deeper than you did, so we'll see. How many of you here are clinicians, physicians, nurses, therapists? I know Dr. Bartlett is here. Where are you? Oh, she's taking a phone call out there. So for those of you who are clinicians, I early on in my age was privileged enough to get introduced to a book that really talk about the power of healing, specifically for women, American women of all ethnic group. And the name of the book is Women Who Run with Wolves. I've read this book up teen time, and I can share with you that this is the book that really helped me to guide my female patient through their journey of healing. For those of you who are therapists, it's written by Dr. Estee, and she is a Jungian, very existential. And so this conversation, there's a couple excerpts that I would like to ask both, make it easy, Dr. Mai Phương and Dr. Swing about this, okay? So let's get started with this one.
I've never run with wolves, but I run with a tiger every day. I have a 12-year-old tiger son, so let me see if I can handle this.
Yeah.
We did not rehearse this. I have no idea what Baxi Clayton is
have
going to
not.
throw at me today, but I came prepared.
Yeah, the three of us met yesterday to prepare for this, and there was a lot that I didn't share with them because I wanted to come out naturally, of course, in a safe environment. So obviously, if anything you feel uncomfortable, just let us know, okay? Tụi này hôm qua đã gặp mặt với nhau khoảng chừng 2 tiếng đồng hồ hả?
Nhưng mà chỉ lo ăn và nói chuyện thị phi thôi.
Tôi không có nói cho hai người này biết, hai vị bác sĩ Bình biết là những câu hỏi nào mà tôi sẽ hỏi hôm nay, tại vì tôi muốn câu trả lời của họ một cách rất là tự nhiên. Không muốn họ về nhà tối hôm qua rồi prepare rồi để mà trả lời. Tôi muốn họ trả lời một cách rất là tự nhiên. So, okay, let's try this. This is going to be fun. So, Mai Phương, in your book, the chapter that this, by the way, this is a wonderful book. It's courageous stories of women of different ethnic groups, and all of them were women of women immigrant. I just put it that way, right? And some are refugee, and obviously Mai Phương is one of those folks. So Mai Phương, just briefly, the chapter on Mai Phương, that the author obviously spent time talking to Mai Phương, and the chapter about Mai Phương is her sharing of her journey, as well as how she got to where she is today. It was very touching, and I'm gonna try to see if I could make the two of you cry, but I think I'm gonna be the first one to cry first. All right.
Anh đọc trước hay anh muốn em tóm lược lại?
No, let's do it that way. Yeah, I don't want you to hide. So in the beginning, the most important passage that Mai Phương and the writer wrote about is Mai Phương when she was very young at the fall of Saigon, and her family tried to leave Saigon. And so to understand let me say this, to understand the root of our pain, we need to understand the root of our previous generation's pain, right? And to make it very simple, to understand our own pain, you need to understand our parents' pain. And I think the issue about trauma is very intergenerational. Khi mà mình nói về chấn thương của nỗi lòng, khi mà mình muốn face, nghĩa là mình muốn đối diện với cái sự đau thương của chính mình, thì mình phải nên tìm hiểu cái vết thương của cái thế hệ trước, nhất là cái vết thương của cha mẹ của mình, nhất là cho những người tị nạn. And you don't have to go very far. Currently, there's a new generations of Americans that are struggling with that. By that, I'm talking about the Afghan refugees. I'm talking about the new Ukrainian refugees who are coming, and you're probably following the story of what has been happening in this last year. In the midst of the pandemic, there are traumatic events that happening into this country, two countries. Phải không? Trong 2 năm nay chúng ta đã trải qua một cái cơn dịch rất là lớn, ảnh hưởng tới cái đời sống của tất cả của chúng mình, nhưng mà có hai nước trên thế giới đã phải trải qua những cái sự việc mà nước Việt Nam của chúng ta trải qua trong năm 1975, đó là nước Afghanistan với lại nước Ukraine. Thì quý vị cũng có nghe trên tin tức về hai cái nước này, thì những người tị nạn đó sẽ cũng phải trải qua những cái quá trình mà mình đã qua. So Mai Phương, the writer wrote this passage at the fall of Saigon. It was the first of only 2 times in her entire life that she witnessed her childhood hero, her father, break down in tears. He cradled his head in his hands and sobbed in utter pain and sorrow. With red eyes, he looked up and lamented to his 4 young children and beautiful wife, "Our country is lost." Mai Phương was still too young to fully understand the depth of her father's anguish. She would learn to live with that loss for most of her adult life. For the next 40 years, she would also learn to unpack and come to peace with that chaotic exodus out of her motherland. In her dreams and subconscious, that escape straight out of Saigon would haunt Mai Phương again and again.
Ai đang cảm xúc đó? Is anyone getting emotional?
I can tell you later on in this passage, it said that your father has not yet been back to Vietnam. Is that correct? I know.
I don't think so. You're
Yeah.
right. Wow,
And-
I told a lot to
Yeah.
Chin Wei.
Yeah, and that really hit home for me because my father also left Vietnam. He was in the service as well with the South Vietnamese government and actually with the U.S. government. He worked for the CIA without us, our knowledge. He left Vietnam, and to the day he died, never went back to Vietnam. So let's talk about that. Your father's loss.
It's the month of May, and you want to talk about our daddies? Okay, we can talk about daddy. Cảm ơn anh. So I just want to give you I actually wrote my own chapter, but we put it in the third person because somehow it distances ourselves a little bit. This book is an anthology of immigrant American women. Most of them, all of us are women of color. The journey to belonging in America as a 0 or first generation immigrant is a difficult one because you have to straddle not only cross-culturally, but so many other things. And then layer on top of that are immigrant refugee traumatic experiences. I didn't think we would talk about that loss, but let's talk a little bit about loss because I think refugees have lost everything. And I think people who are 3rd, 4th, 10th generation Americans really have a hard time wrapping their heads around that. My chapter is called True Healing Through Karuna and Storytelling. And chị Xuyến giúp em thông dịch, em không biết thông dịch như thế nào mà
We will
Karuna-
get there. See how she avoiding this cleverly?
Okay, so to your question, I didn't realize that my dad has never gone back to Vietnam. You know, I grew up not here, and I don't know if you had the awareness to have like 12 different Asian Pacific Islander community-based organizations is a phenomenal gift to Orange County. I grew up in Northern Virginia. I was one of 2 Vietnamese families growing up in the 70s and 80s after a big yucky war that America still has not reconciled. I had no awareness of how lost I was because I hit the ground running, trying to become American as best as I could without awareness because you come home, ăn với đũa, ăn đồ kho, ăn chả lụa, đi vô trường thì phải nói tiếng Anh. I don't even remember how I learned English, I just learned it. It's like I woke up and I learned English in 1st grade. And that it was an insidious drive because you knew you watch your parents work 7 days a week, 120 hours, 3 different jobs below their pay grade. They were college educated, triple lingual, but they were offered, you know, low wage jobs. My father was a French teacher in Vietnam. My mom was a pharmacy student. She oopsie, had 4 children, dropped out of pharmacy school, and then the war came. And then we left in a very chaotic way, but we left with the US evacuation. It's something I'm very, very privileged to tell about. But for a lot of people, once I came to California in 1987 and I heard about the boat people refugees and learned about the horrors of what people sacrifice, it minimized my experience. And so I always heard, mình may mắn quá, mình được, nước Mỹ vượt qua. But it wasn't easy, folks. We had, there were bombs shelling when we went to Tan Son Nhut. I had to get on a chopper at the break of dawn in the dark. The chopper was So when I watch things like Full Metal Jacket or Apocalypse Now, I get these sensations that I didn't even know about. That's a scary thing for a 6-year-old. And then the dirt kicked up, and so I thought I was being bitten by bees because it was piercing, these helicopters with their velocity. And then we said, run and get onto that helicopter. And there were like dozens of people, and it was too heavy. And you've seen these movies, but that was my life. And then we went to Guam Tent City. It was like camp, but we were refugees. There was this mass exodus of 120,000 Vietnamese, and then we had to stand in line in the heat, get food every day. But it was made into like a dream, okay. And then from there we went to Indian Town Gap, another refugee camp. And we lived in barracks which felt like tree houses. And I saw my cousins and my aunties, and so there was joy. It was a lot of joy. And then by Christmas, we were sponsored by a Lutheran family and in Pennsylvania, in this really dank, dark, cold, depressing railroad town. But my first Christmas was filled with joy in that all these total white strangers brought us Christmas gifts and helped paint a house. And we were all together as a family of 6. And I forgot to tell you that my family was split in 2. One went to Wake, one went to Guam. It took 2 months for my dad to find us. But long and short is, I had this happy childhood, and I was always acutely aware of how privileged and blessed I was. But that trauma is still there. So when you think of trauma, you think about rape or being beaten or watching people get shot up. This insidious, traumatic uprooting. And then we were in 5 different housings in Northern Virginia, low-rent housing. And then my dad worked crazy hard. In 2 years, we went from abject poverty to middle-class Americans. And so I just watched this dad who worked and had a vision and had gumption and courage, and he worked nonstop. Long and short was, my whole childhood was witnessing hard-ass work by refugee immigrants who never knew how to rest. And so my chapter book ends. So I left Vietnam April 29th, 75. I was a 3rd-year medical student at LA County USC, one of the largest county hospitals, one of the hardest places to train. April 29th, 1992. That is the day that a black man named Rodney King, who was beaten and pulverized on camera, 4 white officers were proven not guilty and set free, and the entire LA community erupted in fire, bashing the Korean community, and I was frozen. We were in lockdown. We were told we couldn't come to the hospital for morning rounds, and I had a little apartment overseeing El Sereno, a very poor Latino community, and I was paralyzed watching LA in fire. It was exactly what happened April 29, 1975. So to your question, and my father is my childhood hero. He has suffered in ways that he has not reconciled with. We've had trauma in our family because we lived in a family that worked, and never rests. He's 82 years old. He still doesn't know how to rest. I can't help him with that. All I can be is the dutiful daughter that gives him space so that, at nights maybe he can sleep. Most nights he doesn't sleep very well. Many of my elders don't sleep well. They need a lot of other sleep aids. And I think if we can do our jobs as clinicians, as community health healers, Let us create the space so that our elders can sleep at night. Let us create the space where my parents can talk to my American-born child, who to them is very Mekong, is very home, is because they have these unrealistic expectations of this American-born metal tiger, and I'm in the middle.
Yeah.
But the good thing is I have skills and I have hopefully ways of trying to navigate this very rough water, even in my homestead.
Yeah. So Susie, you've seen, I'm sure, you've seen that a lot in the patient population that you trying to support and help to get through this pain. Do you want to share a bit about your own reflections and then your observations in your patient population?
All right. My reflection, yes, I have many older patients who have trouble falling asleep and staying asleep. Now, Dr. Mai Phoong came here kind of 1975, and then over here we have 3 waves of immigrants, Vietnamese immigrants coming into this country. I was a boat person. I escaped by boat from Vietnam when I was 16 and was with our family. So I stayed in a refugee camp, and my stepfather was in political prison for 13 years. Later he got out. I didn't see my family until like 10 years later. But again, going back to my patients, I have patients who struggle some of them was in military services in the south of Vietnam, and they were struggling with, the battlefield, seeing bloodshed, and then their friends were killed instead of them, and some of them have that survival guilt. And I also have patients who refugee experience where the mother witnessed her sons, her twins die in a boat of 40 days without food, and her son didn't make it. And then, the father was in the political prison, came out, went with the mom and the kids, and then the son died. So we have stories where immigrants, refugees, Vietnamese refugees experience a war-torn country, and then there's domestic abuse, there's a domestic violence in the home and all that stuff, and then the refugee experience with piracy and with pirates and oppressions and all that violation, and then coming to this country, experience racial discriminations and all of that. So I'm looking at, I call it a complex trauma. And so I have patients who their body go into this conditioning experience where they cannot turn off. It was like so completely alert and experiences hyper arousal responses, a hypervigilance. They very easy to get nervous. The sounds and the noises and things that are unfamiliar can really get them into the state of defense, where they all the time they needed to protect themselves and protect their family. So I get patients with post-traumatic stress disorder and then major depressive disorder, and then a lot of different types of anxiety disorders, right? So we're looking at how that impacted. Now, if you guys read the books, The Body Keeps the Score, and then you will see how that impacted, right? And so that's some of reflections on the trauma with this different ways of immigrants, Vietnamese immigrants coming to this country, let alone many of them now in a later stage in the 90s, and now, they're living in a country where there's a lot of violations as well, and there was kind of no rights, and that's also part of the trauma as well. So that was my...
But I think okay? that one several lines in your chapter that talk about the fact that many of our seniors that came, first generation that came to the U.S. from war-ridden countries usually suffer in silence, because you come into an environment where you really need to rebuild your life. My parents came as refugee in their mid-40s. they left their fortune, their belonging, everything, and come here with 5 children, young children, and restart their life, right? And most of the families that way, rất nhiều người Việt Nam của chúng ta, nhất là thế hệ của cha mẹ chúng ta đến nước Mỹ để lại tài sản, tất cả những gì họ có vì cái sự vì cái chữ tự do và vì cái niềm về cái cuộc sống của con của họ mà họ tới đây, rồi họ phải bắt đầu lại từ trong lúc mà họ đã 40 tuổi, 50 tuổi, thì đó là một cái sự cực nhọc mà có lẽ những người không có trải qua những cái dữ kiện này sẽ không hiểu. So it's a lot of patient, non-refugee patient, even the younger generation that came from Vietnam now, because remember, since 1975, there are at least 3 generations of Vietnamese that have no knowledge. Well, they do have knowledge, but no emotional attachment to the Vietnam War whatsoever.
Yes.
Right? They read it in textbook, they see it in museum, but with no attachment to that. Similarly, next to Vietnam, Cambodia, it was 2 million lives lost in a short amount of time. Now, this pandemic, this last 2 years, we reached 1 million lives lost to the pandemic, but Cambodia, in a very short time, lost 2 million lives. Think of that number for a tiny country, right? And then there have been generations of Vietnamese, of refugee of any type, specifically Vietnamese and Cambodian, that have no emotional attachment to that. But what I want the two of you to talk about are the generation that grew up with parents who suffer in silence. And what does that do to the youngster, specifically young girls? Who want to start?
Em xin nhấn mạnh, tại vì chị Xuyến nói hơi nhanh á. This book, The Body Keeps the Score. Nếu mà quý vị không có biết cái quyển sách này, nó nói là những cái chấn thương, những cái khủng hoảng mà chúng tôi đã vượt qua đó. Vì mình mới qua đây, bố mẹ phải làm việc rất là cực, không có thì giờ để suy nghĩ về chấn thương hay là quá khứ hay là khổ đau, chỉ biết là chịu đựng, vượt qua. Nhưng mà trong cơ thể của chúng tôi đó, nó giữ cái score, nó giữ điểm là những gì mà mình không có giải thoát được đó, thì mình giữ trong bụng, mình giữ trong tim, mình giữ trong bắp thịt, mình giữ trong những cái tế bào. Và trong cái ngành của Mai Phương đã chứng kiến là nếu mà mình không có một cái cách mà mình giải thoát những cái khó khăn trong đời, thì nó sẽ hấp thụ vô cái tế bào, vô cái cơ thể của mình. Can I share my story about what it means for the body to keep the score? I can.
Yeah, before you go there. See, this woman is good. She's avoiding my question. Let me repeat that.
Okay.
How does your parents' suffering and pain in silence affect you growing up? Because I know you talk about that in your.
So when my parents can't
chapter.
deal with their stuff, it gets passed downhill, and I'm downstream because I'm the third of 4, right? So what did that look like? I watched my father work nonstop. He's actually a pretty amazing human being. He is a record-setting salesperson, and his clientele was every refugee Vietnamese up and down the East Coast, Florida, Texas, and when we ran out of Vietnamese refugees to sell life insurance to, we came to the Mecca of Orange County in 1987. So my father would drive, down to Florida, make his sales, come home. At 12 years old, I'm his little dutiful secretary putting in, phone numbers. How did he do this? This was before the internet, Gen Xers. He would go to a town like Dorchester, Massachusetts, and get a white pages, and we would look up Pham, Trần, Đỗ, Việt, tên Việt, and Nguyễn, and I would put it in, send letters. So I watched my father work, and he was a workaholic. He's still a workaholic at 82. And, you know, it was joyful, but it was very dysfunctional, friends. Let's just call it for what it was. And so, you know, I was his right hand and his left hand, and I was such a good little girl because I loved my daddy, you know. And then so as things go on, we come here, we're gangbusters successful. I get into med school, and I'm just going gangbusters, work, work, work. And County USC just works us to death. And so my model of existence was work, 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 and just keep working some more. I did not learn the true secret of longevity and health and wellness is that you need to sleep 8 hours, you need to eat 3 meals a day, and you need to rest. And I didn't have good mentorship in my own family because we never rested 7 days a week. I didn't know how to rest until I broke down.
Yeah. So American, we have this saying, monkey see, monkey do, right? I always tell my, in training, all my students, I don't care which theory you follow, but that idiom really works so well. Susie, how does that suffer in silence affect your female patients?
Okay. Well, I was at Santa Barbara church yesterday and speaking to about maybe a number of Vietnamese parents. And I talk about the trauma, the intergenerational trauma. And like Dr. Mai Phương said, many of the parents do not allow themselves to rest. They never really feel enough somehow. And I think it could be universal too, but especially with parents who have trauma, somehow it's never enough. So they push their kids, and their kids internalize that pressure. So the kids, they push themselves and they compete for things that outside of themselves, like the grades, the recognitions, and all that. And so I see parents who doesn't know how to rest, and then there is a lot of numbness, not expressing their emotion. There's one patient, he told me that I never experienced my parents' affection or touch, except when my dad hit me. Right. So one of my patients say that, right? And in our community, affection is something else. And like it's not just partly is the culture is not encouraging
Have
it.
you eaten
but
yet?
But the other thing is to show emotions or anything like that. It makes people feel so vulnerable and so not in control somehow, that the parents oftentimes is really it's about control, and the kids feel control, and they react to that, and they try to find the autonomy and the independence, and they traumatize by that control, and that control can come from the verbal put down, humiliation, abuse, or I have a young man in his 30s. He has a PhD in physical therapy, but he was so physically abused by his father and abandoned by his mom that to the days he still suffered a major depressive disorder. He's taking medication, but it doesn't seem like it's really working for him. And he got his PhD, but he doesn't feel connected with himself, and he really hates himself. And that's all of that came from the abuse that he received, and he internalized unconsciously when he was so young, and he still not able to get himself out of that prison yet, that mental prison that he is not good, that he's a bad child. Now, so I think these issues of trauma can be really pervasive, although our community has tremendous strength and a tremendous resiliency. All of us. I mean, all immigrant community, all communities. There are strengths, and we're gonna perhaps talk about that later. But I want to let you know the other side of it, the picture of how trauma affected in a many layers of emotional, social, and relational connection. There's so many relational trauma within the refugees and immigrants' families. Although there's no bomb, no longer there's a war time or anything like that, but that relational trauma. Young people get relational trauma maybe by being bullied at school and then coming home having that relational trauma experience. You can imagine how that can be challenging. And we do have young Vietnamese for the past few years die by suicide, right? And so that was a topic that I talked to the parent yesterday, just to acknowledge the pain and the trauma and learning to take care of ourselves. The parents need to also learn to take care of themselves and soothe their own stress so that they can relate more connected and more in the same pace with their kids. So that is something else, but I just wanted to paint the picture about trauma.
But I think the problem is that many non-Asian therapists, and some Asian therapists too, incorrectly describe the parent-child relationship of the Asian culture is cold and not affectionate, which is not true, because it's caused a lot of confusion, especially for kids who have parents who completely detach with their emotion because of pain, because of survival. It's very difficult. Chúng tôi đang nói về những gia đình mà cha mẹ bị chấn thương rất là to, thành ra đối với con họ không có một cái sự biểu hiện tình cảm, tại vì họ đã có cái vết thương này mà họ không nói ra được và họ không biết cách xử lý được, thì họ cứ làm việc, cứ cắm đầu vào làm việc, họ chỉ nghĩ tới là kiếm được tiền để về nuôi con. And a lot of them believe that the material thing is the obligation that they have for their children, and so thành ra có những người tâm lý trị liệu, người không phải là người Á Đông cứ nói là cha mẹ người Á Đông không có biểu hiện tình cảm của mình cho con. Cái đó không đúng, cái đó là không có đúng, hoàn toàn không đúng.
Em xin nói một xí, tại vì chị Xuyến với Mai Phương với anh Clayton gặp những trường hợp rất là dễ sợ, nhưng mà trong riêng bản thân em á, trong gia đình em rất là nhiều tình cảm. I have French educated parents, so they developed that French amour. You know, I was actually born in the Valley of Love, thung lũng tình yêu in Đà Lạt. So in my family, there was a lot of love. You know, I saw my parents, you know, PDA, public display. It was weird, but, and I didn't realize that was not the norm in Asian cultures until I hear and I see it in other, and yet we can have traumatic lives and not be beaten. Like, the world is a hard place, whether you're immigrant, black, brown, white, whatever. I think the important conversation we should have with the parents and the children is, our parents do the best they can, because if they could do better, they would. Because most parents bring children into this world and they want to give us the tools to be viable humanoids in the universe, right? I think I was very confused as a 20-something-year-old idealistic doctor when, you know, my entire childhood I was told I was gifted, I was told I could do anything I wanted, and that all men and women, they never said women, are created equal. I have memorized the preamble to the Constitution of the United States of America. And then I go into the world of LA County post-LA riots, and it is not a kind place out there. There is a lot of disparity, there's a lot of injustice, and nobody really equipped me with that, because all of the people who grew me up until 24 said I could do anything I wanted. And that's pretty daunting coming from an Asian culture, because most Asian children who are girls aren't told this.
Yeah, but I think the important piece is that many parents said you can do anything you wanted as long as you do law, you do medicine, right? That is
Yeah.
the thing that you have to do, right? So you earlier mentioned a little bit about the model minority. Talk about that.
Let's define it first of all, because a lot of people don't know what that is. The model minority is the idea that Asian Americans are this model minority group, that we are smarter, we get into the Ivy Leagues, we can.
We
be
all
the-
lawyers and doctors.
Yeah, but we're the spelling bee champions
Yep.
and, the valedictorians. I was that model minority growing up, but then the myth part is that a lot of Asians are not the myth, and then they're held to this impossible standard, and so they never feel good enough, they never feel enough, and they just suffer internally. So I was the model minority up until 24 years old. My first experience with that flashback experience above Sereno, watching LA, and then going into the ER and sewing up bruised, bloodied, bullet holed brown and black young boys' bodies. That did a huge traumatic change in my body, and nobody knew what was going on. I had to seek professional help during med school, during medical residency, and I saw a bunch of male clinicians. They were not of Asian descent, and I don't think it even mattered. They just said, you're a medical student. Of course, you're depressed. We all get depressed. Here, take a pill. Take another pill. I came into work as a third-year medical resident at Olive View Medical Center. I was red from head to toe. It was a side effect of a drug that no longer is on the market, and the attending thought I had measles. That's how sick I was. Measles là gì đó? Sởi.
Đau.
Không phải đau mùi. Em uống cái thuốc tâm thần, em bị đỏ từ trên đến dưới,
Phản phụ.
bị sởi. Bác sĩ nói là Mai Phương bị bệnh, bắt đi về nhà. So it was a very long journey, and you should buy the book to read it. And it was horrible because every time I had a problem, the answer was, here, take this antidepressant, antipsychotic, go to counseling with people who didn't have anything to do with what I was going through. And it took 17 years for a female 88-year-old World War II surviving psychiatrist in the Napa Valley where I was living to actually diagnose me correctly, and said that the medication is only part of it, but the true work is you have to look deep into where these episodes are coming from. Her name is Dr. Margaret Prenger. She's now deceased. I love her. She saved my life. I'm in presence of two other people who have helped save my life. I have been suicidal. I have been not myself, and you would never understand how could Mai Phương, the model minority, be in a place where death was better than staying alive and trying to be this impossible doctor, daughter, clinician, minority health advocate, filmmaker. All that stuff goes to pieces when you are not well inside, and when you cannot find someone who tells you to honor your pain and suffering and just blow it off and say, every medical student is depressed, here, take this pill. And then to take the pill and get sick and say, I can't tolerate this medication, can we do something else? And then be labeled a non-compliant patient. Bác sĩ nói là Mai Phương không có theo dõi những lời khuyến khích của bác sĩ. Vì vậy Mai Phương là một bệnh nhân rất là dở, rất là không theo dõi lời khuyến khích. 20 mấy năm trời như vậy, nó rất là làm cái tinh thần của mình nghĩ là mình không khỏe. And I'm a smart cookie folk, so I was doing yoga, I was exercising, I was doing vegetarian diet, I did everything. What I didn't do was give myself space and time, because you don't want your children to be doctors, but it's 1 month rotation and then another rotation and then get that job and then have a crappy job that asks you to see 35 patients a day in 15 minutes, none of them speak English, write your chart notes in English, talk to them in Vietnamese or Spanish, write their notes in. These systems of care was killing me, and it wasn't until I absolutely could not work anymore that I was given the gift of space and time to rest. And it wasn't by choice, and I had to do it.
Yeah. So Susie, how did the model minority fit you?
All right. I'm going to speak a little in Vietnamese and then I say in English. Mà trước khi mà tôi nói chuyện qua tiếng Anh á, thì tôi cũng muốn nói là khi mà gặp cha mẹ Việt Nam á, thì với các em thì tôi thường hay nói với cha mẹ là tôi sẽ gặp các anh chị trước và tôi sẽ gặp các anh chị nhiều hơn là gặp con của anh chị. Tại vì các anh chị những cái vết thương tinh thần của mình sẽ cần rất được là săn sóc. So the one thing that I didn't say in the previous expressions is that for those who are a therapist, usually when the parents come, with the kids and want to help the kids, I say I like to see you. I like to see you more than perhaps your child, because healing takes place in the whole entire family, and I think you so well deserve to be taken care of too. For you to take care of yourself as well, and so I invite them to do so with the family. Now, going back to the story about women, refugee, immigrant women, Vietnamese women experience. I'm gonna go really quick in Vietnamese trước. Thực sự khi mà tôi đến Mỹ, tôi không có hoàn hồn. 7 năm sau tôi mới hoàn hồn được. Cái điều mà giúp cho tôi hoàn hồn là tôi đi một cái conference ở bên Ba Tư, Brazil, và cái conference đó nói về cái vấn đề phụ nữ bị bạo hành, và trong cái conference đó có 1.000 người phụ nữ khắp nơi trên thế giới, những cái nước nghèo, thì tôi được một cái nhà thờ cho tôi cái cơ hội để đi. Thì khi mà người ta nói về những người phụ nữ Đại Hàn bị những người đàn ông lính Nhật hãm hiếp trong cái chiến tranh thế giới thứ hai, và họ cho mình thấy những cái bức ảnh, những cái nghệ thuật của các cái phụ nữ mà nạn nhân đó chiếu lên trên cho cả ngàn người phụ nữ xem như vậy. Và lúc đó họ tắt đèn và họ cho nhạc, thì 1.000 người khóc. Và chính cái sự mà chia sẻ đó của 1.000 người đó, thì lúc đó tôi nhìn thấy bản thân của mình. Tôi nghĩ tới mẹ mình, tới ba bác là chị của mẹ mình, và những người cousin của mình đã từng có những cái trải nghiệm về sách nhiễu tình dục vân vân. Thì tôi cảm thấy tôi không có một mình nữa, và tôi cảm thấy là mình không có đổ lỗi cho mình nữa. Thì sau cái conference đó, cái chuyến đi đó, thì tôi trở thành một cái người khác. Thành ra đó là một cái câu chuyện, và ngay cả trong cái cuộc đời hôn nhân của tôi phải luôn luôn có một cái tờ giấy mà nó có gọi là personal bill of rights, tức là cái quyền con người của mình là cái gì, và tôi phải dùng cái đó để mà tôi có thể sống còn. Và có tiếng nói của mình, và có những cái boundaries, những cái hàng rào cần thiết để mà bảo vệ mình. So I'm going to do it in English really quick. So as a refugee, it's amazing how grief is. Grief it's a lifetime process. It's not something, and it's not just a personal grief. For me, it is a collective grief. Collective grief with my patients, with my families, with my community, or all the communities that share this experience as well of trauma, all kind of trauma. But anyway, my story. When I came to this country, I was not myself. I was lost, until 7 years later, that I really feel like I'm within my body. But it was so helpful that I went to a conference in Brazil, and that was 1,000 women from all over the world, especially from the underdeveloped countries. And I remember I met some doctors from Congo, from Africa, and they didn't have clothes, and we used to share clothes with each other. Before I left, I didn't have anything left from Brazil because the clothes were shared with other doctors from poor countries. But in that conference, it was helpful for me because there was one time the professor from Korea let us see all the artworks from the women was victimized by the Japanese soldier during World War II. and they talked about women's experience of sexual violation around the world and throughout history. And 1,000 of us, we just cried together, all in that crowd. And in that experience, I saw myself. I saw my mom, who was raped when she was very young. She was an orphan, so she was raped and molested. I saw her, I saw my aunt and my cousins, and so I didn't feel like I was alone. I was not alone, and I also felt there was some sense of empowerment, that there's a justice, there's an acknowledgement of what women been through, right? So I came back here a different person. And even throughout my marriage, I have this called personal bill of rights. And I use this with some of my female patients as well, and male patients too. We all need to know our rights. And so that personal bill of rights has been helping me to not feeling so wrong or so victimized, and set boundary in my relations with other people, especially between men and women. And so that was empowering for me. And if you ask me, then that's how I make it through with learning rights and having the collective healing with other women.
Thank you for sharing that. You just make me realize that there's a piece of me that I've never shared publicly. Those of you who know me, you know that I'm half Thai, even though I was born in Vietnam, but my father's side of the families are Thai. And if you know the story of boat people, during those years, many Vietnamese escaped by boat. The woman was sexually assaulted by Thai pirates. And I still remember vividly at the age of 13 in refugee camp. And every day when the boat came into the refugee camp, everybody would come out and see whether or not their family, loved one, would be the next wave of folks who got it. And I remember distinctively seeing women who was raped by a Thai pirate being carried off the boat onto the refugee camp. And I had this tremendous sense of guilt.
Let's just take a breath. This happens when we talk about this hard stuff.
It's okay.
For at least 2 decades after that, I denied my other half of myself, of who I was, the Thai heritage, because I couldn't come to acknowledge that that part of my blood caused pain for the other part of my existence. It was very difficult, very difficult. It cost me years of therapy. When my father passed away, I promised him that I would go back to Thailand and visit his root, which I did. And it was very, very difficult. But he knew, my father knew, there was a reason why I've always never talked about that side of my family. I refused. And for the longest time, I had this guilt feeling with my close Vietnamese female friend. And I would avoid making good relationship with specifically Vietnamese refugee women that was boat people because I had so much guilt in me. So thank you for sharing that story.
So this concept of survivor guilt, I mean, thank you and Clayton for sharing. You know, you didn't do this, and your peoples didn't do it. These nameless, faceless people of that heritage. So let's talk about why we take on these things that aren't really ours to take on. You know, so much suffering. And we just pause, because I am in the presence of 2 incredible champions of culturally competent mental health care, not just for Vietnamese-Americans, but for everyone. This isn't the first time I've heard Ji Suyung share her story. I just want to acknowledge and honor both of you, because I am alive because of the work that you do to break the stigma. Stigma is the bimag. We can't talk about this. We don't go out in the world and talk about this. It's an Asian culture to suffer in silence, quietly in your homes. You don't air your laundry. You don't talk about these hard stuff. And this is part of the problem. So this conference today is for us to stop perpetuating the problem of silence and stigma. So about 10 years ago, Ji Swing convened a group of us. She mentors all kinds of people training. Hugh is among them. And in this small group, we shared a lot of tears, and we shared these dark secrets. And it was the first time that I realized how necessary this was. I can cry on a dime. I have acted. I can do it on demand. But, you know, so much of our culture is don't cry. Don't cry at the table. Man up. I now have a son who cries a lot. He has a lot of tantrums, and I find myself saying, đừng có khóc, nín đi, don't cry. And I have to stop myself because I am part of the problem, the perpetuation. He has feelings he doesn't know how to reconcile. He witnesses things that are conflicting to him. So it's our natural tendency to cry. So why are we as mothers telling our little boys, don't cry? So I catch myself and I said, sao vậy con? Tại sao con khóc? Why are you crying? He's a very angry little boy. I'm a divorced mom. I do a lot of different things. I don't always have the time and the presence for him. He is my greatest teacher and my hugest challenge. He was born in the year of the metal tiger, Kim Kop, very headstrong. So he is my reminder every day that when I come home, regardless of who I'm saving that day or whatever, he is very important. And he doesn't want to hear about how I saved a woman from pressure ulcers all over her butt because she hasn't moved in 7 years. He doesn't want to hear about how I helped XYZ or did this, that. He just wants mommy to be there for him and to accept him for that moment. And if I can share that, because every day is a struggle. It is hard for all of us. But I think let us talk about things that are hard. Let us forgive ourselves. And Clayton, your family did not hurt anybody. So, you know, I carried survival guilt. I have a friend in the audience. I want to acknowledge Anton Lambu of Project Ngọc. We were a quadrant of a dozen very idealistic UCI undergraduates in 87 to 91, helping these refugees. And I did it with so much gusto. And I ate, slept, and did Project Ngọc because I felt so much survival guilt as the lucky 1975ers. And it took a long time to say, you know, I didn't have it easy either. You know, it wasn't easy leaving and having many refugee experiences. So I think the take-home lesson is, whatever your journey, whatever you describe as hurtful and traumatic, honor it. It's real. And work through it instead of don't cry, don't share it.
There's a phrase it says, you know, when you can feel it, you can heal it. Khi bạn cảm nhận được cái cảm xúc của mình thì bạn có thể chữa lành được điều đó. Và cái cảm nhận được cảm xúc của mình nó cũng là một cái hình thức là tự đồng cảm với bản thân. Và trong cái công việc làm của tôi với bệnh nhân thì tôi nói rất nhiều về vấn đề self-compassion, cái sự đồng cảm với những cái vết thương lòng của mình, để mà mình, đó là một trong những cái bước đầu tiên để mình có thể đưa đến sự chữa lành.